tech guru.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Eisenhower Library Museum. Thank you for joining us today for our monthly lunch and learn program. I'm Dwight D, your host for this afternoon. If this is your first time joining us, our 2023 annual theme is difficult decisions. So all year we have been exploring tough decisions. All year we've been making tough decisions. Major in the Eisenhower administration. Not necessarily by President Eisenhower, not necessarily by his administration, but it happened during that time. So today we are pleased to welcome Pastor James Young. He will be talking to us about the difficult decisions President Eisenhower. My microphone is not one of them, great. He will be talking to us about the difficult decision President Eisenhower made for the next term after the party had. So Dr. Young, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Well, Joy, thank you very much. I want to express my appreciation to everybody here from the library and archive for doing some research. And much of what I'm going to be talking about today is from what I learned here at the archives. So thank you very much for that. I do have a connection to Kansas. My father was born just down the road in Palm County, lived in Topeka, graduated from Topeka High School in the 40s. And I graduated from the University of Kansas in 1971. And being here in Purple Country, I apologize for that. But I played in band then and had many great trips to Manhattan because of that. So I still have a lot of fun. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and came back to 2,000 miles away. My dad didn't say no because he loved Kansas. And I heard it was the Berkeley of the Midwest back in the 1960s. So anyway, are the slides up and running right now? Okay. So the subtitle on this is Presidential Health, Difficult Decisions, Eisenhower in the Second Term. And I promised to tell a story because as Robert Frederick Kipling said, history recalls stories no one would forget. And I love this particular example, the story of Viking Tapestry, talking about the death of Harold and the Battle of Hastings with the Norman Conquest. And so today, the discussion will clear understanding a little bit how illness and death affect presidential decision-making generally and the transition of power. The administrative aspects of illness, incapacitation, the limitations of the medical procedures, particularly at the time when I had his first heart attack in 1955 and subsequently. And really focused on the issue of 1955 acute myocardial infarction, heart attack, and decision to run for a second term, as well as the subsequent inflammatory bowel disease, ileitis, bowel obstruction, about a year after the heart attack, operative procedure. I'll explain that a little bit. Also impacted his thinking about running for a second term. And then after he was running for a second term dentistry. And most people don't realize that also could adversely affect some administrative decisions. Now, health in the White House is a subject that there's a lot to talk about. And here you see Eisenhower in 55, we'll talk more about that. But in 72, the governor created fiasco of Eagleton is another example. Eagleton was chosen to be the governor's running mate, and then subsequently leaked out in the press that he had severe depressive disorder. And was hospitalized and had ECT, electroshock therapy, for that. And so he was pulled from the ticket, driver with a substitute, and this is an example of some of the health impacts and decisions which today is a popular topic. Ford in 75 had two assassination attempts that rattled the public and the press. One in Sacramento, and a few weeks later, another one in San Francisco. Squeaky Fromm, for those of you who remember what was going on back then, went to jail for one of the attempts. And then Carter had several adverse events in the White House in 79. Here's a picture of him fainting during a quote fun run. I don't know what fun run is, but faint. And then Reagan in 1981, very interesting to me, because Reagan had a fatal injury. And yet, because of the health care that we got, he survived. Interestingly enough. And if you look at presidential death in the office, the real catastrophic event we don't like to think about or hear about, there have been 8 presidential deaths in office between 1841 and 1963. Interestingly enough, 4 of those presidents were from Ohio, Atlanta, Harrison, Garfield, and King, and Carter. 4 of the 8 were assassinated: Lincoln, Garfield, King, and Kennedy. I just mentioned Reagan's more wound, but he survived. And Lincoln and Kennedy had mortal wounds to the head. Unfortunately, Garfield and King were probably killed by others. It's a separate story, but it's an important one when we relate it to the health that Eisenhower. Now, I can be interested in cardiology, heart failure, cardiac transplantation, artificial hearts, and support devices, which is my entire career. Is when I graduated from KU, I went down to Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, went through an experimental 3-year program down there, and fell under the spell of might be the baby. People might know that name, probably not, but he's a world-class surgeon. And he was running this program, and he had all the students subscribe to doing the Journal of Medicine. One of their requirements was every week the students were required to read the entire journal. And in my first year, 1971 there, this article was published with an academic just heart failure from Framingham study. I'll talk a little bit more about Framingham in a minute. It's the first major cardiovascular study that the government supported, Truman, and started what now is the NIH. And if you just look at these curves, you look at survival out 5 to 10 years for men and women. You can see in the middle curve, survival, wasn't so great in 5 years. Well under 80% for women. It was about twice as bad. And that started me off on a journey that ended up becoming an internist, cardiologist, heart failure, heart transplant, mechanical surgery, support device kind of position. And the link to that, I'll just briefly mention at the very end. We'll go about 40, 25 minutes with the presentation, and then we can have a little bit of a discussion. But I had a link to Eisenhower that is interesting, and I had a link to Eisenhower that is also interesting. But whenever I try to figure out an outcome on something, we use what's called a fishbone diagram approach very frequently. And in this one, the example is this tree post. I'm a big basketball fan. You know, I did not be. And so you can see here the complicated nature of trying to plug in all the little pieces that moves to an outcome of any type. And so if the outcome is what's the impact of presidential illness and disability, and my wife doesn't like to talk about this, but I have a lecture that I call Heart Failure, my specialty, caused the Cold War. And the sequential events from World War I, II, the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, they were all affected by presidential health in one way or another. Wilson had several strokes, the ratification of the Treaty of Versailles after World War I never occurred in the United States. A lot of people don't realize why champagne we call champagne in California. Whereas in Europe, the only place you can call something champagne is champagne that comes from in treating with herself. Party was an interesting death, the role of spouses, presidential spouses, and how they control the health care that the president gave. FDR, I argue that he gave away Poland also because he had bad congestive heart failure. And then you see Eisenhower and the issue with the Suez crisis that was occurring at the time right around he was having his first heart attack, then having surgery for ileitis, and then having a stroke. Kennedy, his adrenal insufficiency, the adrenal glands weren't pumping things up. He was pretty high on steroids at the time. And the decision of the Nixon psychological issues, University of Woodward, have written a lot about, and Reagan's mental acuity, all examples of issue presidents and health. Now, I show this picture because it is a common question, a common subject. We have the president at 80 years of age, we have Trump at 76 years of age, and a lot of conservative papers, even in the debate last night, there was mention of the age of the candidates, the age of the candidates, the age of the current president. And back when Trump was running the first go-around, there was a lot of talk about his age, a lot of talk about himself. And he kind of went in a roundabout way to present the information about his health. And what you see here is a picture of Dr. Neville Wallace. He was a good friend of mine. I was an associate of mine. I was president of the International Society for Lung Transplantation. And Neville was on the board. Neville was heart failure, heart transplant, artificial heart surgery, when I was doing the same kind of things on the side of an intern. And you can see that shortly after Trump was in office, he became quite ill. And what a lot of people don't realize is that COVID episode that he had was a very, very serious episode. That was in 2020. And then President Biden, this is an interesting picture. You see the service guys looking out ahead, and then you see the gaggle of people at the bottom of the ramp up to his plane. They're all turning looking at Biden. And the reason for that, you may know, you may see the picture, he stumbled and fell. He almost fell down the stairs. And so that was in 2022. And then recent articles, this one comes from Dwight D, out of Congress getting over. And again, this picture of McConnell having a classic absence seizure, a petty small seizure, people that might understand that was. It's so classic that if I were teaching a medical student seizure, I would play this over and over and over again. And then Einstein with the senility she has, for example, problems of aging in the White House and illness. And then Fetterman shows you don't have to necessarily be old to have health problems and be in Congress or in the White House. So this is Fetterman, 4 years old. And here again, our friend Dobbs during the run in Pennsylvania against what a lot of people don't know is Fetterman has a terrible heart. How do I know that? Well, it's in the newspapers. It talks about he has a cardiac resynchronization device that I actually helped develop, which is a device for patients of ejection fraction less than 35%. Now, ejection fraction is how hard or squeeze it comes the blood flows out. So if you have a heart failure situation with low ejection fraction, one of these pacemaker devices and the defibrillator that he has helps out. I don't hear anybody talking about this heart failure, but I hear a lot of people talking about depression, his recent things, stuff. But it relates again to Eisenhower, because when Eisenhower was in office, he was the 8th oldest, if you include more recent presidential candidates, the 8th oldest president was in office. And you can see that when he left the office at 70 years old, he was the oldest of the living presidents at the time. So the age-related difficulties and effects were definitely there. He died later in his later 70s, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But if we look at, again, Eisenhower's timeline, we have a compressed event timeline here. We all know Supreme Allied Commander, World War II, President 5361, and his first MI that I'll talk about, 9/23/55 in Denver. So 7 weeks at Citizens Army Hospital with Army MDs, and then a very prominent civilian MD that Nixon had asked the doctors to include if Nixon was concerned about what the press would say, and the public would say about Army physicians only taking care of the rest of the United States. But he did have other problems. It's been called 2 additional crises, the first being heart attack, with Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, and having to go for an emergency operation about 12 months after his initial heart attack, which is a problem, because having had a heart attack and going through major surgery reduces major risk, and teed him up at a time where he was thinking about running for a second term. And if we lost the microphone here, so brief pause. One, two, three, we're back on. All right. And then again, before the second term really had started moving down the tracks, he had a stroke, which was pretty much from the public, but did leak out. He had a second heart attack in November of 1965. Georgia, he was a member of the golf course down there, had what they call the Eisenhower Capitol. There's a picture of the Eisenhower Capitol. It's a mansion. It's sort of a White House down in Augusta. And that heart attack is a pretty big one. And it is publicly developed affairs. And then again, out of March Air Force base, Palm Springs, California, he had another heart attack, which resulted in him being flown to D.C., hospitalized at Walter Reed Hospital, the Airman Hospital. He was in the hospital for 11 months until he died. I'm not going to get into that story very much. That story to me is very interesting because some of the doctors wanted to ship Eisenhower out to Houston, where some of the people who trained me and recommended various operative procedures, including heart transplant. Again, one of my specialties. I was interested in that. And then the other option was to send him to Cleveland, where I worked for almost 30 years, to undergo cardiac catheterization, coronary bypass surgery, words hopefully people recognize. And they left the ventricular aneurysm surgery. I'm talking about that because that was an issue that affected decision making about running for secretary. And the latter part of his difficulties, he really deteriorated and classic end-stage congestive heart failure syndrome that many of my patients have. Many of my patients undergo heart transplant and various surgical procedures for them. So if we look at the first term decision, there's a book about that. William Pickett. And it states a lot of private papers right here at the Eisenhower Library and Archive. And in it, he dedicates it to Robert Sherrill, another person who spent many weeks here at the Eisenhower Archive. So another book that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I was disappointed because the whole thing was the first term decision was anything about the second term decision or the issue of his heart attack. But in the book about the first term, there was some interesting things related to the second term decision. Mainly, he didn't agree with Steve Ambrose, another person who spent a lot of time here at our guys, who cultivated a theme that I was an unwilling politician. And Pickett challenged the notion that he was this select candidate by noting that as far back as World War II, Eisenhower was talking to people about possibly running for president. In 1949, immediately after the war, Eisenhower was talking around about fundraising. Well, he wasn't very happy being president of Columbia University at the time. and was clearly thinking about a second term. In that other book, Robert Carroll, who did a lot of work here, and focused on ill presidents. And if you look at the presidents talked about, Cleveland, Wilson, Harding, Roosevelt, half the book is about Eisenhower. Lots of references to what's in the archives. It's one of the reasons I came down here, because I wanted to actually look at things. And so at the end of this morning, I probably have read 300-400 EKGs that were done on Eisenhower that are in these archives. But in there, he talked about the 55 headline crisis, he talked about second-term decision making, he talked about 2 more crises, the eye surgery, the stroke, and the aftermath of all this, and also talked about Kennedy, Reagan, Bush. And in it, the clear-cut issues were what was the risk of death or incapacitation in a person that's had not a small, not a medium size, but by my interpretation of the EKGs, a very large myocardial infarction that evolved with some unique complications that you can pick out and you can see in the data. The other thing that is relevant to this is Ike's choice of a running, because if there was risk of another big heart attack, the risk of another death in the White House, who was going to be the next president? And we'll get to that in a minute. Now, I was busy. There was a lot going on in his first term and his second term. But for me, if you drop down to the very bottom, the biggest issues that he was dealing with, he did have desegregation, a lot of different things, the economy, but the Cold War in general was the big thing he was trying to do. If you go across the street from the museum, you can see all the exhibits over there about I-20 wage peace and the military-industrial complex that I didn't like very much, even though he spent his entire career before being president in the Army and his illustrious battles that he won. And one fun thing that I found out was I was the guy who developed football, the nuclear football. The bulky briefcase follows the president anywhere and everywhere. With the 24 plant that enabled the president to transfer nuclear orders to the Pentagon. The last time that I remember this was really focused was 9/11, when Bush was flying around, and Air Force One was landing in all these airports. They were trying to figure out what to do, but every time you saw things, you saw the guy with football walking behind, sitting out of the airport. So I was busy, he was waging peace, he was traveling a lot. You see the first inauguration here, January 53, over on behind Ike is Nixon. On the other side of Ike is Truman. Interesting that Truman actually tried to get Ike to run on the Democratic ticket on the first term. And for a lot of different reasons, Ike became a pretty strong Republican. But the big question that is out there is when DE ran for his first term, they won his second term. And a lot of the data, a lot of the correspondence in the archives and everything shows that he was a bit wishy-washy. And then when he was in his second term, when did he really decide that he wanted to run for another term? And you can see the conversation with Nixon after the first term. And they're laughing and joking and whatnot. But Nixon and Eisenhower, I didn't think really got along very well. And there were several issues, one of which I'll talk about. But then boom, you see here, I had his first heart attack. And what that led to was as the Republicans were thinking about second term plans, the plans were shaking pretty bad. Let me give you just a little thought about what a heart attack is. If you look up over in the right corner, you see a coronary here. That's the right coronary artery. I don't want to bore you, but this is the right dominant coronary system. And there's no big proximal lesion. When you get way out to the end of those arteries, you can see what I call lumps. A little atherosclerosis, but not big proximal lesion. And then if you look at the left coronary what we call the widowmaker. Maybe you've heard that expression, but it's a proximal left anterior descending main artery in the heart being blocked there, and you can see the downstream effects of it that completely includes, say, a blood clot. And then over to the left side, you see the buildup of atherosclerosis. You see a gentleman clutching his chest pain, getting the manifestations. And the top, you see coronary balloon angioplasty, stemnoplasty, things that we do today for acute myocardial infarctions. Of course, those weren't around in Eisenhower's days. And today, chest pain and involving myocardial breaks, all that speed, get to the hospital, get clotbusters, thrombolytics, how you can digest the clot. And then subsequently, folks in MI giving a lot of different medications that weren't available when Eisenhower was undergoing heart attacks, like I said, which were many. Some of the medicines, interestingly enough, that we still use today, Eisenhower was on Coumadin, a blood thinner, for example, heparin, another type of blood thinner, and many antiarrhythmic drugs. So when the heart attack came, he was on quote vacation, a working vacation, in Denver. You can see the Dow over to the left where he was staying, and you can see Amy's mother Dow, climbing up the steps. And those steps are an important story in how Plight was handled with his first heart attack. There's the Simmons Hospital, it was a VA hospital at 55, and he was up in the VIP ward on the 8th floor there. You can see the, quote, coronary care unit he was in. This was before coronary care units were common in the United States. You see a typical coronary care unit here with all the monitoring tools, all the therapeutic tools, and they're always next to a cardiac catheterization laboratory, or actually, like we have a clinic, catheterization laboratories inside the heart failure intensive care, the coronary intensive care units there. So quite a different approach to things. And here's Plight with his Fitzsimmons doctors, Griffin. He ran a show at Fitzsimmons. Pollock was the cardiologist. Pollock was the guy who brought an electrocardiogram to the Dow House, where Eisenhower was with a heart attack with the initial diagnosis. And then Snyder was Ike's personal physician for many years. He had been in the Army, he was a general in the Army. He was a surgeon that didn't practice surgery. He was kind of a GP, an old-fashioned sort of GP. And he was sort of a rough and tough guy. And it's this same scenario pushed Nixon to suggest Paul W. White, seen here, to be an outside consultant. I'll talk about him in a minute. Here's Dudley White sitting next to Snyder, and I love that look on Snyder's face. It's a typical look, surgeon looking down at the internal medicine cabinet. And look what's in front of Snyder there. What do you all see right there? See an ashtray. You're absolutely right. Now, this is another picture. The ashtray's not in this picture. I don't know if it's moved or it's just cut off from the side. But that 55 heart attack is called a $15 billion heart attack. That's how much the stock market lost when the news hit the newspapers about our big heart attack. Now, Dudley White, he served in World War I. He was 2 years older than Eisenhower. Did a lot of research, a lot of things were named after White. He was dubbed America's cardiologist by the press, became an advocate of preventive medicine, founded the AHA. I mentioned the proven link that he had with the NIH. And Ike's heart attack wasn't the only political heart attack in 55. Because in July of 55, President Pro Tem of the Senate, LBJ, had a big heart attack. And informed the Senate that he wasn't coming back. And what happened was, I'll get to this in a minute, what happened was that Paul W. White convinced LBJ to return to work and come back to the Senate. So I didn't know Dudley White. He liked him at first, but later on that relationship paled. And we'll get to the reason for that. But Dudley White was wishy-washy about Eisenhower for a second term. He told Eisenhower he shouldn't run, but rather become the director of the campaign for world peace and become the poster child for Marshall, and said he would be the second coming of Christ. And that statement really angered Eisenhower. Eisenhower had to obey. And it caused a split between Dudley White. And so what happened was that there was behind-the-scenes manipulation by Eisenhower and the Army doctors to keep Dudley White away from seeing Eisenhower, although Dudley White kept trying to do it. His last meeting in Gather was around the time in mid-December of 1955, the last health check of the president had prior to announcing his decision. And then one of the real heroes of the Eisenhower heart attack was Tom Madigan, who was an Army cardiologist, who was the chief cardiologist at Walter Reed at the time. And it's interesting, the connection I have to Madigan is that it turns out, I covered all this in the archives, Paul Dudley White trained Madigan. Madigan trained a guy by the name of Robert Hall, who was a career Army cardiologist who ended up at Baylor College of Medicine, and Bob Hall helped train me. And so there was this direct link to all these people there. And Bob Hall, when Madigan died in his 90s, wrote this great memorial that talked about Madigan compiled a detailed medical history of President Eisenhower from National Archives and the Eisenhower Library in Abilene. This document has been a major resource for scholarly examination of policy and medical disclosures concerning the health of presidents and other elected officials. And when Eisenhower had his first heart attack in 1955, Madigan led the medical team, providing the state of care to the president, counsel the patient, maybe as their careless condition, and the information proved key to allowing the president to assess his own ability to run for a second term. Key to that difficult decision. And how did that link? I discovered this in the archives last year when we were here. And Bob Hall, who's seen on the left there, invited Madigan to Houston, in the Texas Heart Institute Physical Hospital, because they named the exercise testing lab after Tom Madigan. Madigan trained Bob Hall. Bob Hall trained me. I was at Top General Hospital and running a cardiology section there and running the non-invasive laboratory. So Bob Hall invited people to this very lecture. And that's how I met Tom Madigan. I didn't realize that until I saw this here in the archives last year. So the other key players were Sherman Adams, Chief of Staff, former Lieutenant Governor, the Dulles brothers, covert side, CIA, the overt side, Secretary of State, Jim Hagerty, Press Secretary. What do you see in Jim Hagerty's hand? The cigarette. And then there's Nixon, the Vice President, and Ann Woodman, the Secretary. And all of them had pretty good access during the post-semi-recovery period in 1955. And if we look at that timeline, it was September 23rd, 1955, that began there fishing in the Rockies. I love what he cooked for breakfast when he was coming down from the fishing here. Breakfast of bacon, sausage, and lunch hot cakes. And went golfing in Cherry Hills that day, interrupted. I was a hot reactor, type A personality. He had a temper. And his doctors kept trying to calm him down. He was irritated by interruptions on the golf course, hated the town home, and a roast lamb dinner, and then developed indigestion about 10 o'clock at night and went to bed. I had indigestion in quotation marks because as you read the characterization in multiple different reports, he was having engine effects. His myocardial infarction was starting way before Dr. Snyder made the diagnosis. They got him to the hospital. But he awoke about 2:30 a.m., Saturday, September 3rd, again, chest pain. Described as indigestion. Maybe gave him some milk of magnesia, worse pain, Snyder called, he shows up about 3 every morning. That's just the picture of Cherry Hills Golf Club. Snyder, interestingly enough, 3:15 in the morning, starts treating Eisenhower, not for indigestion, but for a heart attack. Nitroglycerin, thiaminate, nitrate, inhaled, heparin, vasodilator, morphine, heparin, and anticoagulant. And then did something really strange. I think maybe slept in separate bedrooms. We'll get into that. But he told Mamie to climb into bed with ice because ice was cold, clammy, in what we would say the early stages of shock because of this heart attack rather than ingestion. Eisenhower gets up about 7 hours later, and Snyder finally calls Dr. Pollack, cardiologist at Simmons National for an EKG machine. The first tracing came about 11 hours after the first symptoms that I had. And I showed you that one graphic, what we do today, time and muscle. And he gets the patient to the hospital so he can at least observe that. And an arrhythmia or some problem develops. But that first EKG, which is upstairs in the archives, the actual EKG, shows, quote, a large anterior lateral, front side of the heart, lateral side of the heart, myocardial infarction. I informed plans are going to the symptoms are made, and so carrying this evolving myocardial infarction patient down the stairs and putting him into an ambulance. They walked him down the stairs that I showed you outside of the Dow House, put him in a Secret Service limousine, and he rode a limo to the hospital. And was subsequently admitted to the symptoms on the 24th. Jim Hagerty, press secretary, was notified, called Nixon and Sherman Adams, who had just come back from a trip to Europe. And this is where Nixon stayed in D.C. He didn't know what was going to happen, and Sherman flies to him. Now, Snyder consulted him, chief of cardiology, at Walter Reed. And this is where Nixon thought it was extremely important to have W. White coming in. And White had included him for Sunday morning, September 26th, confirmed the EKG was involving myocardial infarction. Yeah, he really is. His heartbeats, premature, ventricular, or atrial contractions. By the time they got there, he had a pretty good heart rate, pretty good blood pressure, but he had something called a friction rub. And friction rubs, you know how you're sawing the limb, you can hear it. That's what a friction rub is. You hear it over the heart. And Maddie heard it. The other RD doctors didn't. And Maddie was convinced that I was having an evolving large myocardial infarction in something called a left ventricular aneurysm. Very important if we're making a recommendation to a patient about doing something like running for a second term. Very high risk complication of them not to have. And in preparing for the press conference, Hagerty asked how much info to release, and I said to reply, tell the public everything. And that's why we know everything about the bowel movements that Eisenhower had during his post-analytic recovery period. And that's also one of the things, since Paul W. White was running these press conferences, that irritated the heck out of Eisenhower, as you can mention. He was kept in bed rest for at least 3 weeks. We don't do that anymore. There's complications in putting somebody in bed after a heart attack. There was a big argument about should we get him out to a chair early, should we not? You got to have to test on the first move of the chair. So that's why I spent 3 weeks in the bed. And then ultimately 7 weeks because he wanted to be able to walk out of the hospital, climb the stairs to his plane to go home. And it was November 11th that he returned to Gettysburg, to D.C. at Gettysburg. Now, don't get nervous. I'll teach you all how to read EKG in 2 minutes. The middle one is a normal EKG. The The one to the left, that's the first EKG that was done at the Dow Jones that's here in the archives. And I circled just something to look at. Compare that little EKG, just those waveforms, and compare it to the one that's over to the left. Anybody can see differences there. And then if you look at the last EKG that was done before I came back to the White House, this is that same lead. If you compare this lead with this lead over to the left, you see those waves are different. Those patterns mean things. And to me, the trained cardiologist, what they mean is that is a huge infarct that has extended over a several-week period of time. And those, what we call T waves, those inversion dips down, stay the rest of Ike's life. Meaning, there was a complication going on. Meaning that if the doctors had really talked to Ike, would he have chosen to run a second time? Now, just another EKG, you see it in Farrell's book, Yellow Eyes, published in 1992. He discovered this, quote, 1949 EKG. Supposedly it's here. I haven't been able to find it. Even today when I was going through this, I couldn't find this EKG. So, we'll see. Maybe this needs to come back. But why this is important is, was the 55 heart attack the first one that Eisenhower had? And so some argue it wasn't based on this 1949 electrocardiogram. This was before he was the NATO Supreme Commander. It was while he was beginning to think about running the second term. This is way before any thoughts about the second term run. And if you go down and again, you look at these tracings that I have outlined in red, they compare to the normal tracing, you can see that there are some differences. Now, my interpretation is 49 EKG from the book picture that's in the Farrell book is that I think I probably had what we call a sub-endocardial myocardial infarction, small. He was laid up, I think it was at Willard Hotel in D.C. for a week, couldn't get out of bed, got real dizzy, he had chest pain, he had the place went. Was sent down to Key West to recover by Snyder. No mention of any prior cardiovascular disease, but it was 1949 that I quit a 4-pack-a-day smoke camp. Something bothered Ike enough to give up cigarettes. Now, again, we come back to the heart attack. We see lots of coverage of it in the newspapers in early September. And if you look at White House operations, they seem to go along okay. And Dudley White was very optimistic. I did conditions satisfactory, when I was good, he gave me the light schedule in 2 weeks, all well. And the chief of staff subsequently, they weekly visits to see her. Here's some pictures. I love the title that you have up because you show one of these pictures up on the roof there. And then you see Amy and I coming out of the hospital on November 11th, Armistice Day, what we call Veterans Day today, to go back to D.C. and go to Gettysburg. Now again, I mentioned Ike was the only 55 behind. There was another heart attack that year. It was LBJ. I mentioned there's been a lot of coverage of this. In fact, LBJ really talked about not running for president, not even coming back, but he did come back. This is his return to his office after his heart attack, and it was done in life. They could just come back and go to work. And it also has a story behind two presidents, Democrat and Republican, becoming fast friends and companions. And what tied them together was this 55 heart attack. And why I show this one too is look at Ike. This is when he was in the hospital at Walter Reed. This is towards the end of life in 1968, 1969. Look at his, what we call cachexia. If you look at his leg, you can see edema down there. He has severe heart failure, and he's a dying man now. Now, here's a picture of Dick Nixon and Eisenhower and Eisenhower's son, John, coming down out of Columbine, in his arrival on November 11th, and over on the other side, November 14th, when he went to Gettysburg. And there was a big hoo-ha when he got back to Gettysburg. And I showed this picture of him standing up in the limousine. I think this is that second inauguration. The reason I show it is he was so angry at his doctors and Secret Service because they wouldn't let him ride in the limousine. I campaigned like this, standing up, riding around in these limousines, and he loved it. But he wasn't allowed to stand up, and in his book, Eisenhower said it disturbed him because he was moving back and forth, waving out the windows. He said he just would have been able to stand up, he wouldn't have become so fatigued. But he did start back to work. Things did run fairly smoothly. The entire period of time, there wasn't a lot happening in Congress was in session. Sherman was flying all around Europe, trying to take care of things. This is November 22nd. 55 Hagerty, you can see right there in the middle, you can see Nixon sitting across from there. But this was the beginning of Ice at our his downward trend. This is just a diagram. This Stevens, a good friend of mine, has put this together. If you follow the curves, it's a downward trend of patients with heart failure, ending up with palliative care, and then ending up with death in a 5 to 10 year period of time. And so on December 26th, Eisenhower had called Nixon in to talk about re-election. Wasn't half a day for Nixon. But Eisenhower described this as the sort of Damocles, his heart attack hanging over his head. He suggested that if Eisenhower could run, Nixon should consider cabinet positions in running. And Nixon was crushed. And since crisis emphasized DD's uncertainty about a second term linked to his heart attack. Now I had to look up what the sort of Damocles should be. And so this painting by Richard Westphal shows that it's a constant, imminent threat that's sort of hanging by a thread over the head of the potential victim. It comes from Cicero's tale of Damocles entertained by Dionysius. Damocles was constantly fearing downfall through subversion of coitus. And so for Eisenhower, the sort of Damocles was another heart attack, particularly one of them. And so the second term, if we look at it, we look at Snyder running a lot of the healthcare. Snyder was 74 years old in 55. He was the next surgeon. Well, he wasn't a cardiologist, but he took a lot of care and got in the way of some of the other doctors, particularly that. And if you look at one quote, Snyder was a guy who was in a position for judgment to affect the history of the United States. He knew rather than a cardiologist seemed to focus mostly on it. And then coming down to the second term, Eisenhower did rely on the opinions of the surgeons. So Heaton, a surgeon that had operated on Bertillaitis, supported from, manually reluctantly joined Snyder and others. Pollock, the guy who diagnosed the first heart attack, encouraged that to run. And then Paul Dunn and White finally agreed to recommend a run for him. Now, I mentioned this aneurysm, and don't spend too much time looking at this, but an aneurysm is just a big bulge out of the heart where the scar tissue pumps out. And why this is important is that stroke that Eisenhower had, I am absolutely convinced from reading medical records that the stroke was from an embolus coming from that elevated aneurysm. Mattingly all along said yes. Now, I'll jump ahead. His autopsy, Eisenhower had an aneurysm with a lot of clotting. Mattingly was right. So then, back at Gettysburg, I became profoundly depressed, suffering from special health and only the victims of severe depression. No one close to it. He run again. He began to have second thoughts. But P.D. Plight said he could run. Now, he went to Key West in early January, and this really was when the decision was made to run for a second term, in my opinion. When the press asked him if they were going to run again, he answered, all the considerations of flight effects things are complicated, and I put out one that confers with trusted advisors, doctor. It is the most tiring job in the world. It also has a set of reports inspirations, but I've already applied one of the first included the DBU with the time. Back in Getty, and Milton had a dinner that Eisenhower had, which was great. He brought in guests and all the people who worked for him. And they all said he should run except for Milton, because only Eisenhower could prevent war, create permanent peace, rebuild the Republican Party, blah, 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 blah. And John Eisenhower, his son, told him what he wanted to hear. Maybe Dr. Snyder wished he would run. Maybe I concluded he just didn't want to Thomas. Right? And there were several things that were done. U.S. News World Report did a survey of cardiologists, with 64% of them saying that yes, he should run, 60% saying that they didn't think there would be a problem, and yet Plight in 56 showed this paper, which shows the survival rate after a myocardial infarction at that time in 55 was only about 56%. 50-50 chance to survive. Gotten much better, I won't go into that. We have different tools so we can predict things differently. But the one thing we can't do is we can take a crowd and we can separate into those who are highly likely to have a heart attack in a year, 5 years, 10 years, and those who aren't, so there's no A in my group. But the thing that we can't do is we can't take an individual and say, if they're going to have a heart attack, or they're going to have a problem. We still can't do that. And back in 55, it's probably impossible. But it's sort of like playing cards. 2% chance of pulling an ace of spades out of deck. 8% chance of pulling 4 aces out of deck. So it's the odds. I'm going to skip this, right? Because I want to show you another picture of Snyder. You can see that I'm very well referenced here in the archive. You can see Snyder here with a cigarette in his fingers. And what this is this was after an examination about fitness and duty for Eisenhower after the heart attack. And so to wind down, the choice was in fact Eisenhower. The risk of having a heart attack and dying were out there. But then on February 29th, the rather infamous announcement on TV, and we've got some really bad images of that. But you can see on TV, I talking about running again. He made the announcement. Here he is at the end of the meeting, and with the rest of his family behind at that announcement. If you can get on C-SPAN, you can actually see this. It's pretty hard to watch. And so, if you look at what the doctors were saying way back in May, they had absolutely no mention of any of the abnormalities that he had. And I mentioned his surgery, he had a bowel obstruction, he had to have bypass, moving the distal end of the small bowel up and nasopharyngeal into the transverse section of the colon. And this is important because mortality rates for this type of surgery after myocardial infarction were pretty high, about 8.5%, which is 2.9%. This was about a year after I made his decision and was campaigning and off the election goes. I'm going to skip this one. He won the election. It was a huge election, and there were some publications of Eisenhower thinking of resigning after the 57 stroke, which she didn't do. So I'm going to stop there and thank the audience. I hope I haven't inundated you with too much medical perspective, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Got a few minutes for questions.
Are there any questions in the audience? Yes, sir.
Were there any repercussions or questions either in the medical community or on the press of Eisenhower's position shooting a friend of mine at home in the middle of the night and yet not calling?
Yes, all over the place. There's huge criticism of Dr. Schneider for putting Ike to bed and just sitting there, even though he was treating for a heart attack. Now, what he told me was he was having a bad case of indigestion, and he maintained that all through the night. And the other thing that other researchers here have done is they've criticized Schneider's writings. There's a lot of Schneider's writings up here in our side. And some believe that Schneider has removed some of the EKGs that were part of Ike's record and realigned them, particularly the ones in the 40s, and I showed you that one that has popped up in 49, realigned them to create a picture that Eisenhower did not have significant atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and wrote a lot, Schneider did, about why he didn't want to rile everybody up in the outhouse, get everybody excited, because he was worried that that would make Ike worse. But it was bad.
Very quickly before we get to the next question, there are notepads on your table. If you don't feel comfortable asking your question out loud, you can write it down and one of the staffers will come and grab it. As a follow-up, so what you're saying is he knew from the beginning of the heart attack. He just.
I believe it did.
Okay. All right. Next question, anyone? Yes.
Okay, you mentioned that before he decided to run, the various doctors involved with the system and had to say if they thought it was okay. Was that from the perspective of, is this a guy who be president again, or was it looking at him as a patient who recommended to our patient?
I think it was as much the former, as you pointed out, as the latter. I think there were some self-serving reasons that they wanted Eisenhower to run again, likely because he was going to be reelected. And there were disagreements amongst the doctors about whether or not Eisenhower did in fact have this left ventricular aneurysm, which made the prognosis much, much worse. And Mattingly was the one that championed the aneurysm. It was difficult at that time to diagnose aneurysm, but Mattingly turned out to be the master clinician, even far better than Paul Dwight, who said to be the American cardiologist.
That noise he heard.
Yeah, friction run. Sandpaper rubbing together. And Mattingly, when you read his notes, the original notes, which I read in this morning, Mattingly also felt a bulge at the wrong spot, and believed that was the bulge in the aneurysm as the heart contracted. And others did not agree with him.
Yes, sir.
X-ray?
Well, X-rays were done at that time, so chest X-rays were done, and fluoroscopic evaluations, looking at a beating heart and stuff, and X-rays in different positions. And there was one or two of the reports that I read that were very suggestive of a left ventricular aneurysm, and most of them just talked about a borderline enlargement of the heart. The X-rays weren't very helpful back then. There's something called a myocardial. They attach a thing to the chest wall and draws pictures. It's the heart is beating. And that wasn't very good either. No echocardiography, no enzymatic diagnosis of heart attack, no other other imaging things were done at the time. And the problem with what I mentioned about the recommendation of heart transplant, and that's clearly recommended bypass surgery and operation on things or something, it's clearly they have one. And then the referral to the Cleveland Clinic, Keaton, who was the surgeon that did the valve operation, nixed all of those recommendations. Eisenhower never had cardiac catheterization in 1968, 1969, something that was very common. Eisenhower, and Minister reading the autopsy report, had treatable, surgically treatable complications from his myocardial infarctions. That's my opinion as a heart failure, heart transplant doc. Now, transplant I wouldn't have done in 68. They weren't working out so good. But in 60, but then, you know, later on,
You said he stopped smoking. Did he completely stop smoking?
yes.
Was that just for a minute?
No. No.
At that point, would that have made any difference?
I think him stopping smoking didn't. He had risk factors for myocardial infarction, family history, a little bit of hypertension. But the way he stopped was rather than rationing the number of cigarettes per day, he used him not smoking to demean other smokers. He had an interesting personality. So the power of just cold turkey stopping smoking, the power that it gave to demean other people who lit up a cigarette, like Snyder, Dr. Snyder. You know where he stopped smoking? It's like cold turkey.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much, Dr. Young. Just a few things before we go. Okay, I think we go here. Just a few announcements. First of all, again, thank you all for coming. The 2023 programs are brought to us by the Jeff Coat Foundation and the Eisenhower Foundation. Without these two foundations, we would not be able to present these programs and have lunch for you, and everything that I do is because of them. Our next program, Dr. Philip Joyce, is actually our Lunch and Learn, will be in September. That is the new. He is going to be virtual, but he'll be right here in this space. And then Will still be in this space, not him. And then if you want to learn about our other programs, please join our email list that you can find on eisenhowerlibrary.gov, and then we will send out your program. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you again, Dr. Young. Have a great afternoon.